You actually think I'm leaving empty-handed? Zelia asked, her voice barely a whisper, yet it sliced through the silence of the marble foyer like a diamond cutter. Sterling didn't look up from his scotch. You signed the prenup, Zelia. You leave with what you came with, which, if I recall, was debt and a pretty face. Then you haven't been paying attention, she replied, closing the heavy oak door behind her for the last time. The sunlight over the Hartwood estate wasn't warm, it was interrogative. It beat down on the manicured lawns and the white limestone walls, exposing every flaw, every crack, every imperfection. But today, inside the library, the floors were human. Zelia sat in a high-backed leather chair that felt more like a defendant's dock than furniture. Across from her sat the tribunal, Thaddeus Whitwell, the family patriarch and CEO of Whitwell Hartwood Dynamics, his son, Sterling Hartwood, her husband of 5 years, and a lawyer she had never met, a man with eyes like polished flint. It's a clean break, Zelia, Thaddeus said. He didn't shout. Thaddeus never shouted. He viewed volume as a waste of energy when precision did the job better. He slid a black folder across the mahogany desk. Irreconcilable differences. The optics will be managed. We've already drafted the press release. You simply grew apart. Sad, really. Zelia looked at Sterling. He was standing by the window, staring out at the sprawling vineyards that produced the wine they served at charity galas. Galas Zelia had organized. Galas that had laundered the family's reputation more times than she could count. Sterling was wearing the cashmere sweater she had bought him for his birthday. He looked devastatingly handsome and entirely cowardly. "Sterling," she asked. Her voice was steady, void of the trembling they expected. He turned, swirling the ice in his glass. "It's business, Zelia. You know how father gets. The merger with the Stonecrest Group. They need assurances, stability. A wife with your background is a liability now." "My background," Zelia repeated. "You mean the fact that I was a barista when you met me? That I didn't come from money?" "Among other things," Thaddeus interjected smoothly. "You were a delight, my dear. Truly. You wore the jewels well. You smiled at the right donors. But the era of the trophy is over. We need a dynasty partner. Someone like Zephira." The name hung in the air like dust in a shaft of light. Zephira, the daughter of a tech mogul, a woman who spoke 3 languages and coded in 2 others, a merger marriage. "So I'm being fired," Zelia said, her fingers resting lightly on the black folder. "Severed," Thaddeus corrected. "And per the prenuptial agreement you signed 5 years ago, you leave with the assets you brought into the marriage, which, according to our forensic accountants, amounts to a beat-up Honda Civic, which we unfortunately scrapped years ago, and a student loan debt which, out of the kindness of my heart, I have paid off." Thaddeus smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "You're debt-free, Zelia. Consider it a severance package. You have 1 hour to pack your personal effects. No jewelry purchased by the family. No couture purchased on family cards. Just you." Zelia stood up. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the heavy crystal ashtray at Thaddeus's head, though the trajectory calculation flashed through her mind instantly. She looked at Sterling one last time. "You're making a mistake," she said. It wasn't a threat. It sounded like a diagnosis. Sterling sighed, finally looking her in the eye. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, Zelia. You're a survivor. You'll find some other rich idiot. Just go." Zelia picked up the pen. She didn't hesitate. She signed the papers with a flourish, the scratch of the nib loud in the silent room. "1 hour," Thaddeus said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Security will escort you out." Zelia walked out of the library, and up the grand staircase. She didn't go to the master closet, filled with Versace and Gucci. She went to the guest room, reached under the mattress, and pulled out a small, battered duffel bag. Inside were 3 things: a change of nondescript clothes, a burner phone, and a small, encrypted USB drive that looked like a tube of lipstick. She changed out of her silk blouse and tailored trousers into jeans and a grey hoodie. She stripped off the diamond wedding band, the tennis bracelet, and the pearl earrings, placing them neatly on the bedside table. She walked down the stairs 40 minutes later. The staff, people she had treated with kindness for 5 years, averted their eyes. Thaddeus had likely threatened their jobs if they showed her sympathy. The security guard, a man named Marcus, whom Zilia had once helped with a legal issue regarding his son, looked pained. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hartwood," he murmured as he opened the heavy front door. "Mr. Whitwell ordered a car to take you to the city. A cab." "It's okay, Marcus," Zelia said, stepping out into the blinding, oppressive afternoon sun. The heat radiated off the driveway. There was no dramatic storm, no cinematic rain to hide her tears, just the harsh, bleaching light of reality. "And it's Miss Vance now. Actually. No, it's just Zelia." She got into the waiting yellow taxi. As it pulled away, she didn't look back at the mansion that had been her home. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket and dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "Status?" a voice answered, deep, gravelly, and familiar. "Discarded," Zelia said, her eyes hard as flint. "The asset is in play. Initiate Phase 2. "About time," the voice, Ronan Graythorne, replied. "I was getting tired of watching you play house." The taxi dropped her off not at a cheap motel, as Thaddeus would have anticipated, but at a nondescript industrial building in the Arts District. The windows were grime-streaked, and the graffiti on the brickwork was layers deep. Zelia walked to the side door, typed a code into a keypad hidden behind a loose brick, and entered. The interior was a stark contrast to the exterior. It was a climate-controlled, sound-proofed fortress of solitude. Servers hummed in the corner with a blue, soothing light. A wall of monitors displayed real-time market data from Tokyo, London, and New York. Sitting on a beaten-up leather sofa, tossing a baseball in the air, was Ronan Graythorne. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than the taxi she had just ridden in, but his tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up. Ronan was the fixer for the city's elite, a man who existed in the grey areas of the law. "You look terrible," Ronan noted, catching the ball. "Domesticity didn't suit you, X." "It was a cover, Ronan." "You know that," Zelia said, dropping the duffel bag. She walked straight to the main console and began typing. Her fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, a rhythm she hadn't allowed herself to fall into for years. "Did they suspect anything?" Ronan asked, walking over to pour 2 cups of black coffee. "Thaddeus thinks I'm a gold digger who lost her shovel. Sterling thinks I'm a heartbroken beauty queen. They checked my bank accounts, my emails, my phone records. They found exactly what I wanted them to find. A woman obsessed with Pilates, charity auctions, and keeping her husband happy." Ronan chuckled, handing her a mug. "If only they knew that the charity auction software you built was actually a backdoor data mining operation." Zelia took a sip. The coffee was bitter, strong, and perfect. "They threw me out, Ronan, with nothing. Thaddeus actually gloated about paying off my student loans. That was nice of him. It was insulting, but it breaks the contract of dependency. They cut me loose. Legally, I am a stranger to them now, which means I'm a competitor." Zelia brought up a schematic on the large center screen. It was the architectural blueprint of Whitwell Hartwood Dynamics' upcoming merger with the Stonecrest Group. Thaddeus is rushing the merger, Zelia explained. He needs Stonecrest's logistics network to cover up the massive hemorrhage in his Asian division. If that merger fails, the stock tanks. If the stock tanks, the margin calls come in. The empire crumbles. "And where do you fit in?" Ronan asked, leaning against the desk. "You want to short the stock?" "Too small," Zelia said. "I don't want to make money, Ronan. I have money. I've been siphoning consulting fees through shell companies for 5 years every time I gave Sterling an idea that saved the company millions. I have enough. Then what? I want my name back," she said, turning to him. "My real name." Ronan whistled low. "That's dangerous. If you reveal who you really are, the enemies from your father's past, the people who burned down your childhood home." "They're already here," Zelia said. "Thaddeus is in bed with them. That's why he needs the Stonecrest merger. Ulrich Stonecrest is the clean face, but the money behind him, it's dirty. If I stop this merger, I expose Thaddeus. But to stop it, I have to enter the arena." "You need a Trojan horse," Ronan mused. "I have one," Zelia smiled, and for the first time that day, it was a genuine, terrifying smile. "Me, or rather, the version of me they don't know, exists." She pulled the lipstick USB drive from her pocket and plugged it into the console. The screens flooded with code, complex, beautiful, and distinct. "This is the source code for the Heartwood algorithm," Zelia said. "The predictive AI that makes their trading firm unbeatable. Sterling thinks his team built it. Thaddeus thinks they bought it. But I wrote it, piece by piece, late at night, while Sterling was sleeping off his hangovers. I embedded it into their systems under the guise of optimization patches. And I built in a kill switch, but I'm not going to use it. Not yet. Why not? Because if I just crash it, they'll blame a glitch. They'll recover. I need to beat them. I need to walk into that boardroom and prove that without me, they are nothing. I need to meet Yvonne." "Yvonne is already in place," Ronan confirmed. "She's been working as Thaddeus's executive assistant for 6 months. She's the one who flagged the new wife candidate." "Zephyra," Zelia nodded. "Tell me about her." "Smart," Ronan said. "Ruthless. A younger, hungrier version of who they thought you were. But she has a weakness. She's arrogant. She thinks she's walking into a leadership vacuum. She doesn't realize she's walking into a trap." Zelia turned back to the screen. "Then let's welcome her to the family." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere at Whitwell Heartwood Dynamics was electric. The headquarters, a glass needle piercing the sky of the financial district, was buzzing with the news of the impending engagement between Sterling Heartwood and Zephyra Vance. No relation to Zelia's maiden name, a cruel coincidence Thaddeus enjoyed. In the executive suite, Sterling was looking at the engagement ring. It was bigger than the one he had given Zelia. Cleaner. Colder. "Stop fidgeting," Thaddeus snapped from his desk. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes. Ulrich Stonecrest will be there. This isn't just about a marriage, Sterling. It's about survival." "I know, Father," Sterling said, snapping the velvet box shut. "But have you noticed the numbers?" "What numbers?" "The predictive algorithm. It's drifting, just by a fraction of a percent. But on our volume, that's millions a day. The tech team can't find the source. They say the code feels heavy. It's likely just market volatility," Thaddeus dismissed. "Once Zephyra brings her team in, they'll overhaul the IT department, focus on the merger." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Whitwell, Mr. Stonecrest is here, and there is someone else." "Who?" "She says she represents a minority shareholder group that holds the veto rights on the merger." Thaddeus frowned. "That's impossible. We own the majority. The rest is scattered among thousands of retail investors. She insists, sir. She has the paperwork. Thaddeus stood up, buttoning his jacket. Let's go see who wants to commit financial suicide today. The boardroom was a cavern of glass and steel. At the head of the table sat Ulrich Stonecrest, a man who looked like he was carved from granite. Beside him sat Zephyra, looking poised and sharp in a crimson suit. Sterling took his seat, avoiding Zephyra's assessing gaze. "Gentlemen," Ulrich rumbled, "and lady, we are ready to sign. But I hear there is an objection." Thaddeus remained standing. "A clerical error, surely. Who is this representative?" The double doors at the far end of the room opened. It wasn't Zelia who walked in. It was a woman in her 60s, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. This was Yvonne. But she wasn't playing the secretary today. She walked with the authority of a judge. "Gentlemen," Yvonne said, placing the briefcase on the table. "My name is Yvonne Leclerc. I represent the Ether Trust." "I've never heard of it," Thaddeus scoffed. "You wouldn't have," Yvonne said calmly. "It's a holding company that has been quietly acquiring your Class B non-voting stock for 5 years. However, buried in your corporate bylaws written by your grandfather, Thaddeus, is a clause. If the company's proprietary technology, specifically the source of 60% of its revenue, is owned by a third party, that third party gains voting rights equal to the value of the IP." The room went silent. The air conditioning hissed. "That's absurd," Sterling laughed nervously. "We own our tech. We built the algorithm." "Did you?" Yvonne challenged. "Can you show me the development logs, the patch notes, the original source code author?" Sterling looked at Thaddeus. Thaddeus narrowed his eyes. "We purchased the base code. It's ours." Actually, Yvonne opened her briefcase and slid a single document down the long table. It stopped perfectly in front of Ulrich Stonecrest. The copyright for the core logic heuristic used by Whitwell Hartwood was filed 5 years ago. It is held by the Ether Trust, and the trust has just activated its voting rights. We vote no on the merger. Ulrich picked up the document. He read it, his eyebrows climbing his forehead. He looked at Thaddeus. "Is this true? You don't own your own engine?" "Of course we do," Thaddeus roared, losing his composure. "This is a fraud. Who is the beneficiary of this trust?" Yvonne smiled. "The beneficiary prefers to remain anonymous for the moment, but she has instructed me to tell you that she is willing to sell the rights to the code. For a price." "Name it," Sterling said quickly. "Total dissolution of the board," Yvonne said, "and a public admission of incompetence." "Get out!" Thaddeus slammed his hand on the table. "Security!" "I wouldn't do that," Zephyra spoke up for the first time. Her voice was cool, analytical. She was looking at a tablet. "Thaddeus, look at the screen." On the wall monitors, the Whitwell Hartwood stock ticker was flashing red. "What is happening?" Thaddeus whispered. "The algorithm," Zephyra said, her eyes wide. "It stopped. It just stopped trading. The liquidity is drying up. We're losing $10 million a minute." "Turn it back on," Thaddeus screamed at Sterling. "Call IT." "They can't," Yvonne said softly. "The owner of the IP has revoked the license, effective immediately." Thaddeus turned on Yvonne, his face purple. "Who is she? Who is doing this to me?" Yvonne didn't answer. She just looked at the door. The doors opened again. This time, the figure entering wasn't a lawyer. She wore a black dress that fit like armor, high heels that clicked like gunshots against the floor, and her hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that highlighted her cheekbones. It was Zelia. But it wasn't the Zelia they knew. The softness was gone. The eagerness to please was incinerated. "Hello, Thaddeus," she said, her voice echoing in the panicked room. "Hello, Sterling. I believe you have something of mine." Sterling stared, his mouth open. "Zelia, what are you doing here? You can't be here." "I was invited," Zelia said, walking to the head of the table. She didn't look at her ex-husband. She looked directly at Ulrich Stonecrest. "Mr. Stonecrest," Zelia said, extending a hand, "I believe we haven't been properly introduced. My name is Zelia." "Mrs. Hartwood," Ulrich said, confused. "No," she corrected him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hartwood was a temporary designation. "I am the Ether Trust." She turned to Thaddeus, whose face had gone pale. "And I'm here to collect my severance package." Thaddeus gripped the edge of the table. You wrote the code? You? You can't even balance a checkbook." "I let you believe that," Zelia said, leaning in close. "Because a wife who asks questions is annoying. But a wife who builds the weapon you use to rob the world? She's dangerous. You threw me out with nothing, Thaddeus. But you forgot one thing." "What?" he hissed. "You forgot to change the passwords." Zelia tapped a single key on the laptop in front of an empty chair. The screens on the wall changed. The red falling numbers stopped. Instead, a logo appeared, a stylized phoenix rising from ash. "The system is locked," Zelia announced to the room, "and the encryption key is in my head. So, gentlemen, shall we negotiate, or shall I let it burn?" Zephyra looked from Thaddeus to Zelia, a spark of admiration igniting in her eyes. "She has you checkmated, Thaddeus." "She has nothing," Thaddeus spat. "This is corporate sabotage. I'll have you arrested." "On what grounds?" Ronan Graythorne walked in, flanked by 2 other lawyers. "She's protecting her intellectual property, and I have the patent filings to prove it. Dated 4 years ago. Notarized." Sterling slumped in his chair. "Zelia, why?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes were not angry. They were indifferent. "Because, Sterling, I have ambition too. I just didn't need to marry someone to get it. This isn't over," Thaddeus growled, pulling out his phone. "I have judges in my pocket. I have the mayor." "Call them," Zelia challenged. "But ask yourself, Thaddeus, if I was smart enough to build the machine that made you rich, what makes you think I didn't build a machine to record every illegal thing you ever did with it?" Thaddeus froze. The phone hovered in his hand. The silence in the room was absolute. "That's what I thought," Zelia whispered. "Now, sit down. We have a lot to discuss before the market closes." The silence in the boardroom was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, a physical weight pressing down on the lungs of everyone present. The red light of the stock ticker on the wall had flatlined, replaced by the serene, pulsing logo of the Phoenix, Zelia's mark. Thaddeus Whitwell sat slowly, his legs suddenly unable to support the weight of his own hubris. He looked at the phone in his hand, then at Zelia, who stood at the head of the table like a prosecuting angel. "You're bluffing," Thaddeus said, though his voice lacked its usual granite timbre. "You have nothing on me. My operations are clean. My lawyers insured it." "Your lawyers?" Zelia laughed softly, a sound that chilled the room. "You mean the ones who routed your kickbacks through shell companies in the Caymans? Or the ones who paid off the environmental inspectors when your chemical plant in the Delta started leaking?" "I have the receipts, Thaddeus. Not just the bank transfers, the emails, or the voice memos you recorded on your private server, the server I maintained." She tapped a key on the laptop. A voice filled the room, Thaddeus's voice, unmistakable in its arrogance. "If the regulator asks about the waste disposal, tell him the records were lost in the flood. Pay him double his annual salary if he hesitates. Just make the problem go away. Sterling turned to his father, his face draining of color. Father, is that the Delta project? You told me we passed inspection. Shut up, Sterling, Thaddeus snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at Ulrich Stonecrest. Ulrich, this is deep fake technology. She's manufacturing evidence. You can't believe this. Ulrich Stonecrest, the man whose merger was supposed to save the dynasty, sat back in his chair. He didn't look angry. He looked fascinated. He picked up his glass of water, took a slow sip, and set it down. The voice matching is perfect, Ulrich noted dryly, and considering my due diligence team found some irregularities in your environmental reports last week, I'm inclined to believe the woman holding the encryption keys. Ulrich turned his gaze to Zelia. So, the merger is dead. That much is clear. The question is, what is your endgame, Ms. Vance, Zelia said. My name is Zelia Vance, and the merger isn't dead, Mr. Stonecrest. It's just under new management. You, Thaddeus scoffed, regaining a sliver of his venom. You think you can run this company? You're a barista who got lucky with a keyboard. I'm the architect of your success, Zelia corrected him sharply. Every major trade, every predictive model, every risk assessment for the last 5 years came from me. You were just the face. And frankly, Thaddeus, the face is looking tired. She walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically. She stopped behind Sterling's chair. He stiffened, smelling her perfume, a scent of jasmine and sandalwood that used to comfort him, now terrifying him. Here is the offer, Zelia said, addressing the room. The Ether Trust, me, will sell the rights to the core logic heuristic to Whitwell Hartwood Dynamics. The price is simple. Thaddeus Whitwell resigns immediately, surrendering his voting shares to the board. Sterling Hartwood is demoted to a non-executive role with no voting power, and the board appoints a new CEO of my choosing. And if I refuse, Thaddeus snarled, then the glitch becomes permanent, Zelia shrugged. The stock opens at 0 tomorrow. The SEC gets an anonymous package containing 10 terabytes of incriminating data. And you spend the rest of your life fighting federal indictments instead of enjoying your retirement. Sterling looked up at her, his eyes pleading. Zelia, please. We were married. Doesn't that mean anything? I protected you from him as much as I could. Protected me? Zelia looked down at him, her expression softening into pity. Sterling, you watched him humiliate me for 5 years. You let him treat me like a servant in my own home. You didn't protect me. You just stood by and hoped I wouldn't notice I was drowning. I loved you, he whispered. You loved the idea of me, she corrected. You loved having a wife who fixed your life without asking for credit. But the fixer is gone. The architect is here. I accept. A voice cut through the tension. It wasn't Thaddeus. It was Ulrich Stonecrest. What? Thaddeus whipped around. You can't accept. It's not your company yet. It is if I buy the debt, Ulrich said calmly, which I did this morning. My analyst saw the volatility. I bought your outstanding loans from the bank an hour ago. Technically, Thaddeus, I own the building we're sitting in, and I rather like Miss Vance's proposal. It's clean. Ulrich stood up and offered a hand to Zelia. If you can get the system back online within the hour, I'll back your play. Thaddeus is out. You name the CEO. Zelia took his hand. Deal. You traitor. Thaddeus lunged across the table, not at Ulrich, but at Zelia. It was a desperate, animalistic move. But before he could reach her, Zephyra moved. In a blur of crimson silk, she was out of her chair, intercepting Thaddeus. She didn't strike him. She simply caught his wrist with a grip that looked surprisingly strong, twisting it behind his back and forcing him down into his chair. "Sit down, Thaddeus," Zephira said, her voice bored. "You're embarrassing yourself, and you're wrinkling my suit." Thaddeus gasped, clutching his arm as she released him. He looked at Zephira with betrayal written in every line of his face. You were supposed to be on my side. We had a deal." "I bet on winners," Zephira said, smoothing her jacket. She looked at Zelia and winked, and clearly the winning horse just changed lanes. Zelia looked at Zephira, surprised. She had expected the younger woman to be an enemy. Instead, she saw a predator recognizing another apex predator. "Get him out of here," Ulrich ordered the security guards who had been standing by the door, unsure of who to obey. They looked at the new power dynamic, made their calculation, and moved toward Thaddeus. "This isn't over," Thaddeus screamed as they dragged him out. "I built this. I am Whitwell Hartwood. You'll regret this, Zelia. I'll burn it all down." The doors slammed shut. The silence returned, but this time it was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire has ceased. "Well," Ronan said from the corner, breaking the tension. That went better than expected. Zelia didn't smile. She looked at the laptop screen, typed a command, and watched as the Phoenix logo dissolved. The stock ticker flickered back to life. The numbers started moving, green, climbing, recovering. "It's done," she said quietly. "Not quite," Zephira said, walking over to the window to look out at the city. "Thaddeus isn't the type to go quietly into the night. He has contingencies, nasty ones." Zelia turned to her. "Why did you help me?" Zephira turned, her expression unreadable. "Because I did my research too, Zelia. I knew who you were. I studied your code at university. I knew the Hartwood algorithm was too elegant for a drunk like Sterling or a brute like Thaddeus. I wanted to meet the ghost." "And now that you have?" "Now," Zephira smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression. "I want to see if you can survive the fallout. Because Thaddeus was right about one thing. He will try to burn it all down, and he knows where the matches are." The victory champagne tasted like ash in Zelia's mouth. 3 days had passed since the boardroom coup. The media was calling it the Phoenix Rising, painting Zelia as the avenging angel of Wall Street. Her face was on every financial news channel. The barista-turned-billionaire narrative was playing on loop. But inside the fortified industrial loft in the arts district, the mood was grim. "He's gone underground," Ronan said, tossing a file onto the coffee table. "Thaddeus. He skipped bail on the fraud charges this morning. His private jet is grounded. His passports are flagged, but he's vanished." Zelia stared at the monitors. The stock was stabilizing, but there was a new anomaly in the data stream. A shadow. "He's not running," Zelia said, zooming in on a packet of data traffic. "He's regrouping. Look at this." She pointed to a spike in server requests, originating from a bouncing IP address. Russia, then Brazil, then a server farm in Nevada. "What is it?" Ronan asked. "It's a brute force attack," Zelia said, "but not on the main system. He knows he can't break my encryption there. He's targeting the backups, the legacy drives." "Why?" "Because that's where the bodies are buried," a voice said from the doorway. Zelia and Ronan spun around. Zephira was standing there, leaning against the metal doorframe. She was dressed in black leather motorcycle gear, holding a helmet. She looked less like a corporate heiress and more like a hacker queen. "How did you get in here?" Ronan demanded, his hand moving toward his jacket where he kept his piece. "Please," Zephira rolled her eyes. "The keypad code is a sequence of prime numbers derived from the Fibonacci spiral. It took me 30 seconds. And Zelia, you really should update your firewall firmware. I pinged your location 10 minutes ago. Zelia held up a hand to stop Ronan. What do you want, Zephyra? To help, Zephyra said, walking into the room and throwing her helmet on the couch. Thaddeus contacted me an hour ago. Zelia froze. What did he say? He offered me $1 billion, Zephyra said, casually, inspecting her nails. In untraceable crypto. All I have to do is insert a USB drive into the main server at the headquarters. A logic bomb. And I told him to go to hell, Zephyra said, looking up, her eyes fierce. I don't like being used as a pawn, and I certainly don't like old men who think they can buy loyalty. So you came here to warn us? I came here to join you, Zephyra corrected. Thaddeus isn't working alone. He's hired the Silencers. Do you know them? Ronan's face went pale. Mercenaries, ex-military. They specialize in corporate extraction and wet work. Exactly, Zephyra said. They aren't just hacking the legacy drives. They're coming for the source. You, Zelia. Thaddeus doesn't just want the company back. He wants you dead. He thinks if he kills the creator, he can reset the code. He's wrong, Zelia said. If I die, the key deletes itself. The algorithm implodes. The company goes bankrupt instantly. He doesn't know that, Zephyra countered. He thinks he can torture the key out of you. Zelia looked at the two of them. Ronan, her old friend, the muscle and the heart. Zephyra, the new variable, the sharp edge she didn't know she needed. Why should I trust you? Zelia asked Zephyra. You were engaged to my husband. Ex-husband, Zephyra corrected. And honestly, he was boring. He talked about golf and his father's approval. You? You took down an empire with a laptop and a grudge. That's compelling. Zephyra walked over to the console. Look, I brought a peace offering. She pulled a tablet from her jacket and synced it to the main screen. A map of the city appeared, with moving red dots converging on the arts district. This is the tracking data from Thaddeus's burner phone, Zephyra explained. I cloned it when he called me. Those red dots, that's his strike team. They're 5 miles out. Ronan grabbed his phone. We need to move. Now. This place isn't secure. No, Zelia said, her voice steady. She watched the red dots moving through the city grid. If we run, they'll hunt us. We have the home field advantage here. This building is a fortress. It's a warehouse with a lock, Ronan argued. These are professionals. And this is my world, Zelia said. Zephyra, can you access the city's traffic grid? Zephyra smiled, cracking her knuckles. I thought you'd never ask. Ronan, Zelia turned to him. Load the blackout protocol onto the local servers. We're going to turn this building into a ghost. You want to fight them? Ronan asked, incredulous. I want to trap them, Zelia said. Thaddeus is watching this raid live. I want him to see what happens when he comes for the Queen. The three of them moved with synchronized purpose. Zelia at the main terminal, coding defenses. Zephyra hacking the traffic lights to slow the approaching convoy. Ronan arming the physical security measures of the loft. Steel shutters, electrified handles, tear gas canisters in the vents. They're 2 miles out, Zephyra called out. I turned all the lights on 4th Street red, but they're running them. Let them come, Zelia whispered, her fingers blurring. I'm ready. But as she typed, a sudden wave of nausea hit her. Not fear. Something else. A memory. She looked at the screen, at the code she had written years ago. The code that Thaddeus had stolen, the code that had defined her worth. Was I any better than him? She wondered. I'm using the same tools, the same manipulation. Focus X, Ronan shouted. 1 mile! Zelia shook her head, clearing the doubt. No, he destroys for greed. I destroy for survival. There is a difference. They're here, Zephyra said, her voice dropping. On the security feed, 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the building. 12 men in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn. They moved with terrifying precision. "Kill the lights," Zelia ordered. Ronan pulled a lever. The building plunged into darkness. The only light came from the glowing blue screens of the server wall, illuminating Zelia's face like a mask of war. The silence in the loft was absolute, save for the hum of the cooling fans. Outside, the world was muffled by the thick brick walls, but on the security monitors, now switching to thermal imaging, the heat signatures of the intruders glowed like angry ghosts. "They're breaching the south entrance," Ronan whispered, checking the feed on his tablet. He was crouched behind the heavy oak desk near the door, a stun baton in one hand and a taser in the other. He wasn't a killer, and neither was Zelia. They had agreed. Incapacitate, expose, humiliate. "Let them in," Zelia said through her headset. She was hidden in the server room, the nerve center of the loft, protected by a glass wall that was bullet-resistant up to a point. Zephyra was in the ventilation shafts above, a vantage point she had insisted on taking. The south door exploded inward, not with a bang, but with a dull thud and a hiss of cutting torches. The steel gave way. 4 figures moved into the main living area. Their night vision goggles were active, scanning the room. "Clear left," one whispered. The audio was being picked up by Zelia's hidden microphones. "Clear right. Target is likely in the server room. Extraction order is valid. Lethal force. Authorized for anyone else." Zelia's jaw tightened. Lethal force. Thaddeus wasn't playing games. "Zephyra, now," Zelia commanded. From the ceiling, a small object dropped. It looked like a marble. It hit the floor in the center of the squad and emitted a high-frequency pulse. The intruders screamed, ripping their headsets off. The sound was designed to overload audio receivers and cause temporary disorientation. "Flash!" one shouted. Ronan moved. He didn't shoot. He activated the loft's fire suppression system, but only in that specific zone. High-pressure halon gas flooded the entryway, instantly robbing the air of oxygen and creating a thick, white fog. The mercenaries choked, their coordination breaking. In the chaos, Ronan slid across the floor, staying low. The stun baton crackled blue. Zap, zap. 2 men went down, convulsing. "Fall back! It's a trap!" the leader yelled, firing blindly into the dark. Bullets sparked against the steel beams. "Phase 2, Zelia said calmly. She typed a command. The smart home system, usually used for mood lighting and music, turned into a weapon. Strobe lights began to flash at an epileptic frequency, disorienting, nauseating. The sound system blasted a distorted, bass-heavy feedback loop that rattled the teeth. The remaining 2 men in the entryway stumbled, blinded and deafened. Zephyra dropped from the rafters like a spider, landing behind them. She didn't have weapons, but she had a taser prod. She used it with surgical precision. 4 down, 8 to go. But the second team was smarter. They hadn't entered. They were setting charges on the main structural pillars outside. "Zelia," Zephyra yelled over the comms. "They aren't trying to breach anymore. They're trying to bring the building down." Zelia looked at the external cameras. The men were planting C4. "They're going to bury us," Ronan realized, dragging one of the unconscious mercenaries out of the gas cloud. "No," Zelia said. "They need the servers intact. Thaddeus needs the drive. If they drop the building, they destroy the asset." "They don't care!" Zephyra shouted. "Thaddeus must have changed the orders. If he can't have it, nobody can." Scorched earth. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Zelia's focus. The calculations in her head shifted. She had planned for extraction, for negotiation, for a cyber battle. She hadn't planned on a demolition. "We have to leave," Zelia said, grabbing the master drive, the lipstick tube, the back exit, the tunnel. "It's blocked," Ronan said. I welded it shut last week for security." "Unweld it! I don't have a torch!" The first explosion rocked the building. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A structural beam groaned, the sound like a dying whale. "The integrity is failing," Zelia said, watching the stress sensors on her screen turn red. "We have maybe 2 minutes before the roof collapses." "The window?" Zephyra pointed to the large industrial window overlooking the alley. "It's a 30-foot drop." "Better than being crushed," Ronan said. He grabbed a heavy chair and hurled it through the glass. It shattered outward. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the sound of sirens. Police. Finally. But they were too far away. "Go!" Zelia shouted. Ronan helped Zephyra onto the ledge. She scrambled down the fire escape ladder that was rusted and precarious. Ronan followed. Zelia turned back to the servers. She couldn't leave them. Not yet. If the mercenaries found the local cache, they could reconstruct enough of the code to restart the algorithm. Thaddeus would win. "Zelia, move!" Ronan screamed from the ladder. "1 second!" She typed the final command. Format C:/all. The ultimate suicide pill for her creation. The progress bar appeared. Deleting 10%, 20%. A second explosion shook the floor. The server rack tipped over, crashing down inches from her. Sparks showered the room. 50%. The door to the server room burst open. Not the mercenaries. It was the leader of the second team. He wasn't wearing a mask. He had a scar running down his cheek and eyes dead of any humanity. He raised a suppressed pistol. "Step away from the console, Mrs. Hartwood," he said calmly. Zelia froze. Her hand hovered over the enter key. The deletion was queued, but she needed to confirm the override. "It's over," he said, walking closer. "Step away and you live. Thaddeus wants you alive, if possible, but he pays the same for a corpse." 80%. The auto-delete was running, but slowly. "Shoot me," Zelia said, turning to face him. And the system wipes instantly. Biometric dead man switch. My heart stops. The code vanishes. The mercenary paused. It was a lie, but a plausible one in her world. "You're bluffing. Try me." They stared at each other. The building groaned again. Dust filled the air. 90%. "Drop the gun," a voice said. The mercenary spun around. Sterling Hartwood was standing in the shattered window frame, looking terrified, disheveled, and holding a shaking revolver. "Sterling," Zelia breathed. "I said drop it," Sterling yelled, his voice cracking. He had climbed the fire escape. He looked ridiculous in his torn suit, sweating, panting. But he was there. The mercenary laughed. "Kid, you don't have the guts." He raised his gun toward Sterling. Bang! The shot didn't come from the mercenary. It came from Sterling. He closed his eyes and pulled the trigger. The bullet went wide, shattering a monitor behind the mercenary. But the distraction was enough. Zelia grabbed the heavy mechanical keyboard and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the mercenary's temple with a sickening crack. He crumpled to the floor. 100%. Deletion complete. The screens went black. The blue light died. The room was plunged into total darkness. "Zelia!" Sterling scrambled into the room, tripping over cables. "We have to go. The roof is coming down." He grabbed her hand. His palm was sweaty, his grip desperate. For the first time in 5 years, he was actually holding on to her, not just standing beside her. They ran. They vaulted through the window just as the main support beam gave way. The floor of the loft collapsed inward with a roar that shook the entire block. They landed on the metal landing of the fire escape, the impact jarring their bones. Dust billowed out of the window like smoke from a dragon's mouth. Below in the alley, Ronan and Zephyra were waiting in the getaway car, a battered sedan. "Get in!" Ronan screamed. Sterling and Zelia scrambled down the ladder and dove into the back seat. Ronan floored it, tires screeching as they peeled out of the alley, seconds before a chunk of masonry smashed into the pavement where they had been standing. Zelia looked back through the rear window. Her sanctuary, her fortress, was a ruin. The dust cloud was rising into the night sky, obscuring the stars. She looked at Sterling, who was hyperventilating next to her. "You came back," she said, stunned. "I couldn't let him kill you," Sterling gasped, wiping soot from his face. "I'm a coward, Zelia, I know that, but I'm not him." Zelia looked at his shaking hands. Then she looked at the lipstick drive in her pocket. The original code was safe, but the company servers were wiped. The backups were destroyed. She had won, but she had also lost everything she had built. "Where to?" Ronan asked from the front seat, his eyes on the rearview mirror. "The police station," Zelia said. "It's time to end this. Legally." "No." Zephyra turned around from the passenger seat. "Not the police. The news station. Channel 4 is live right now. If we go to the cops, Thaddeus's lawyers will bury us in paperwork for years. If we go live on air, he can't hide." Zelia looked at the three of them, her ragtag army, the fixer, the rival, the ex-husband. "Channel 4, Zelia agreed. "Let's go tell the world a story." The Channel 4 news station was a brutalist slab of concrete in the center of the city, surrounded by a perimeter of satellite trucks and bright artificial halogen lights that cut through the night. It was a fortress of information, and right now it was Zelia's only hope. Ronan drove the battered sedan up onto the sidewalk, scattering trash cans, and screeched to a halt right in front of the glass revolving doors. Smoke was still billowing from the hood of the car, a testament to their escape from the collapsing warehouse. "We have 3 minutes before the 10 p.m. newsbreak ends, and they go back to the anchors," Zephyra said, checking her smartwatch. She looked immaculate despite the chaos, her leather jacket dusted with plaster, but her composure unshaken. "Thaddeus is already inside. I'm tracking his signal. He's in Studio B, doing an exclusive interview about the terrorist attack on his data center." "He's spinning it already," Zelia murmured, stepping out of the car. She clutched the lipstick drive in her hand like a talisman. "He's going to blame us for the explosion." Sterling stumbled out of the back seat, looking pale. He adjusted his torn suit jacket. "Security will never let us in. I know the head of security here. He's on Father's payroll." "We aren't asking for permission," Zelia said. She looked at Ronan. "Do you still have that press badge from your days representing the journalist union?" Ronan grinned, pulling a crumpled laminate from his wallet. "Expired 5 years ago, but it gets us through the first gate." They moved as a unit. Zelia, the architect, Ronan, the muscle, Zephyra, the infiltration specialist, and Sterling, the wild card. At the security desk, the guard looked up, startled by the disheveled group. "Hey, you can't—" Ronan slammed the badge on the counter while simultaneously leaning in, his large frame blocking the guard's view of Zelia and Sterling. "Union Representative Emergency Safety Audit. We had reports of a gas leak in the sub-basement. You want to be responsible if the anchors pass out on air." The guard hesitated. "I didn't hear about a leak." "That's because the sensors are bypassed," Zephyra interjected, flashing a tablet screen, showing a flashing red warning icon she had just coded. "Do you smell that? Sulfur?" The power of suggestion was a terrifying thing. The guard sniffed, frowned, and buzzed the turnstile. "Make it quick." They sprinted toward the elevators. As the doors closed, Zelia turned to Sterling. "When we get in there, you can't just stand in the back. Thaddeus will try to dominate the room. You have to break his narrative." I don't know if I can," Sterling admitted, his voice trembling. "He's been the voice inside my head my whole life." "Then change the channel," Zelia said fiercely. You saved my life tonight, Sterling. You pulled the trigger. You're not his son anymore. You're your own man." The elevator dinged at the 14th floor, Studio B. The hallway was quiet, the on-air signs glowing an ominous red. Through the soundproof glass of the control booth, they could see the news anchor, a seasoned journalist named Marcus Trent, nodding solemnly as Thaddeus Whitwell spoke. Thaddeus looked perfect. His suit was crisp, his face a mask of sorrowful indignation. He was playing the victim perfectly. Zilia pushed open the heavy door to the studio floor. The floor manager hissed, waving his arms frantically, but Ronan simply stepped in front of him, arms crossed. "A tragic act of corporate sabotage," Thaddeus was saying into the camera, his voice thick with emotion. "A disgruntled ex-wife, Zilia Vance, working with anarchists, destroyed our facility tonight. They wiped out years of medical research data. It's not just a crime against my company. It's a crime against humanity." "That's a lie." The voice didn't come from Zilia. It came from Sterling. He walked into the circle of bright studio lights. The cameras, programmed to follow movement, swiveled automatically toward him. Thaddeus's eyes went wide. The anchor, sensing gold, signaled the cameramen to keep rolling. "Sterling?" Thaddeus stood up, his microphone clipped to his lapel rustling. "My son, thank God you're safe. I thought they had kidnapped you." "Nobody kidnapped me," Sterling said, his voice gaining strength. He looked directly into the lens of camera 1. "I was there, Father. I saw you send the silencers. I saw them rig the charges. There was no medical research. It was a server farm for high-frequency trading algorithms and illegal surveillance data." "He's in shock," Thaddeus said quickly, turning to the anchor. "Cut the feed. My son is suffering from Stockholm Syndrome." "I'm not in shock," Sterling said, stepping closer to his father. "I'm awake, for the first time in 30 years. "Security!" Thaddeus roared, dropping the act. "We have the evidence." Zilia stepped into the light. The room went silent. She looked battered, covered in dust, her hair wild, a stark contrast to the polished image she had maintained for years. She looked like a survivor. She held up the lipstick drive. "This drive contains the source code for the Whitwell-Hartwood success," Zilia said to the camera. "But more importantly, it contains the metadata of every transaction Thaddeus Whitwell has made for the last decade, the bribes to zoning commissioners, the payoffs to suppress the environmental toxicity reports in the Delta, the laundering of cartel money through the Ether Trust accounts." Thaddeus lunged for her, but Ronan was there in a flash, shoving the older man back into his chair. "This is live, Thaddeus," Zephyr called out from the side, holding up her phone, which was streaming the broadcast to social media, bypassing any delay the station might try to impose. 3 million viewers and counting. Wave to the shareholders. Thaddeus looked around the studio. He saw the cameramen filming, the anchor watching with hungry eyes, the red tally lights of the cameras burning into him. He realized with a dawning horror that he couldn't buy his way out of this room. "You stole my company," Thaddeus hissed at Zilia, his voice low, venomous, audible only to her and the boom mic hovering overhead. "I took back what you stole from the world," Zilia replied, calm and cold. "The police are on their way, Thaddeus. Not for me. For you." As if on cue, the heavy studio doors burst open again. This time it wasn't mercenaries. It was the city police, led by a detective holding a warrant Zilia had digitally filed hours ago. As they handcuffed Thaddeus Whitwell on live television, he didn't look at the police. He looked at Sterling. "You are nothing," Thaddeus spat at his son. "I made you. I can unmake you." Sterling straightened his tie, looking at his father with a pity that cut deeper than hate. "You can't unmake me, father, because I'm not made of your money anymore." Zelia watched them drag him away. The adrenaline that had sustained her crashed. She swayed, and Zephyra caught her arm. "We did it," Zephyra whispered. Zelia looked at the camera, at the red light that was finally fading to black as the station cut to commercial. "No," Zelia said softly. "We just started." 3 weeks into the trial, Thaddeus's high-priced lawyers were winning. They painted Zelia as a fraud, and the evidence as inadmissible. The narrative was shifting, and Thaddeus looked untouchable. On the final day, Thaddeus took the stand. "I designed the architecture," he lied smoothly to the jury. "Zelia merely had access to my passwords. She betrayed my trust." Zelia stood up. "Your Honor, I have rebuttal evidence, a document unsealed this morning by the Zurich archives." She presented a yellowed piece of paper, the original incorporation papers for Ether Dynamics, dated 25 years ago. It listed 2 founders, Thaddeus Whitwell and Silas Ether. "Silas Ether was the true genius," Zelia told the stunned courtroom. "You bankrupted him to steal the kernel code. You destroyed him." "Relevance!" the defense screamed. "The relevance," Zelia said, her voice turning to ice, "is that Silas had a daughter who was put into foster care. My name isn't Zelia Vance. It is Zelia Ether. I am the sole surviving heir." Thaddeus went pale as the ghost of his past materialized before him. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible. I didn't steal the company, Thaddeus. I inherited it." Thaddeus stood up, his composure shattering. "It's a forgery! She's a witch! I killed him! I buried him!" The confession rang out in the silent room. Realizing what he had said, Thaddeus clamped a hand over his mouth. But it was too late. The judge revoked his bail immediately. As marshals dragged him away, screaming, Zelia stood tall, her true name finally restoring the balance. What a journey. Zelia didn't just win, she rewrote the entire game. It goes to show that when you strip someone of everything, you might just reveal exactly who they really are. And in Zelia's case, that was a force of nature. Thaddeus thought he could bury the past, but he forgot that seeds also grow in the dark. Zelia's story reminds us that authentic power comes from truth, and no amount of money can buy the kind of loyalty she earned from Zephyra, Ronan, and eventually, even Sterling. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes corporate warfare and ultimate redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder that the underdog can always bite back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.